Heyo, Hudson here with Planet 4 Gaming. This time I'm flying a plane that maybe gets overlooked a lot, but I feel it deserves a video. It deserves to have a few things said about it, and I feel very strongly about some issues with the implementation of this plane, let's say. Well, for starters, it has some very good traits, some very good characteristics. It has a great armament. It has two German MG-151 cannons, which I'd say are an improvement over the Japanese cannons we've been using, the Type 99, which do pretty good damage, but don't have that speed or rate of fire that the 151 offers. So we have that. Just be sure to conserve ammo when using it. That's the big thing. It has a very good dive speed, which is something the Japanese have been very lacking in until the Hien is unlocked. The Zeros just cannot compete with the Americans in dive speed in any way. Its straight line speed is decent. It's a modest improvement over the Zero, but not exceptional. And compared to many American planes, it's still not a competitor in that area. Its turn time is okay. Depending on what plane you're fighting, you can possibly outturn them. It's, I'd say, the worst turn fighter in the Japanese tree, but the Japanese have the best turn fighters in the game, so that's not necessarily a huge insult, but still be careful, know what you're doing when you're turn fighting, don't get caught at low altitude with low speed, and you should be okay. So I'm in a full game here. There are a few issues I'd like to address later, but I'll talk about this game first, because there'll be a few moments of some downtime. But anyway, right now I'm starting off on Iwo Jima. I've climbed to a reasonable altitude and then made for the kamikaze AI planes, which I figured at least a few American fighters would try to head for those. And I was correct. This guy, God damn it, or whatever his name is supposed to be pronounced. I picture it with a southern accent because of the way he said God. God. Whatever. Fitting for his American fighter, I guess. Anyway, I like to head for those kamikazes because usually a few noobish American pilots will head over there looking for some free AI kills, which are not worth anything, so I don't know why you would do that, but they do it anyway. And I was correct, but the Mustang was able to dive out and get away. The Corsair had an altitude advantage, so he got out of there too. And this brings us to my first problem with the Hien. It can't compete with the Mustang at all. Its only advantage is in firepower, which is only important when you're on the fighter's tail. And if there's a competent person flying the Mustang, you will never be on its tail. So, why does the Hien face the Mustang? Well, that's a good question. It has a battle rating of 4.7, which, in my opinion, is far too high. The Ki-61-I, which comes before it, has 450 cals. It doesn't have the 20mm cannons, and it has a battle rating of 3.3. So it's a 1.4 battle rating difference, which is pretty significant, seeing how the Ki-61-I is going up against maybe Hellcats, P-40s. I haven't flown it much, but I assume that's kind of the range it would be going up against. So you might be wondering, well, Hudson, what improvements did they make to the plane other than firepower that might give it this increased battle rating? Well, that is a very interesting question, and my answer to you is this: it is worse. It is worse in climb rate, it is worse in turn time. The addition of 20mm cannons have increased the weight on this plane enough that it's actually gotten worse in those respects. Not by much, but even if they were exactly the same, I would still say the Ki-61 is not fit to be going up against Mustangs. So on that subject, the climb rate, it is not, that is the most glaring deficiency in this plane. You'll see the zeros have pretty much double your altitude by the time you've gotten to the enemy, which is a very big issue in a plane that is mainly meant as a kind of pseudo-energy fighter with modest turn fighting abilities. Yeah, that's all I got to say about that. That's the biggest issue, climb rate. If you can get above the enemy, which you'll probably have to climb out to the side of the map, not go directly at the enemy because they'll be above you no matter what, you'll kind of have to avoid the fight for a few minutes to get up to altitude where you can attack the enemy. But on that note, when you get too high, the performance starts to decrease pretty dramatically on this plane. When you're above 5,000 meters, it starts coughing and sputtering like a 90-year-old man without his oxygen tank. And yeah, that's a big issue. But is it impossible to do well with this plane? No, absolutely not. You may have to take advantage of enemies' mistakes a lot of the time. You'll want to keep your altitude at least 1,500 meters at all times unless you're very sure that you can handle maybe a one-on-one situation at low altitude. And if you play smart, you can do well with this plane. But I think to give this plane a fair shot at doing a good job in a balanced match, it needs its battle rating lowered. If you were fighting P-47s instead of Mustangs and Airacobras, then that would be the best fit for this one. But Gaijin, given their firepower fetish, have decided, no, you need to be fighting Mustangs. Which, whatever. But getting back on the subject of this game, I know I'm doing things a bit different in this video, but I have a lot I wanted to talk about this plane, and the beginning of this match was fairly slow. I do promise I will get kills. Don't worry about that. I had been trailing that damaged Mustang back there who was at low altitude. He was heading back for the carriers, but when I saw this guy, God damn it, again, kind of messing with my zeros a bit, I decided I should head back to the island. They won't be able to keep up with them. At least with the Hien's dive speed, I can dive in, get off some shots before he escapes, if he does escape. So I've dove in, I'm gaining on him, I'm gonna fire just my machine guns, not waste cannon ammo. And then once he turns like that, he's turning, I'm gonna line up a shot. He gives me a perfect angle, I set him on fire, and he goes down into the ocean. And that, you can see the Hien's strength there, diving in, building up enough speed to catch up, but then you can see the Mustang was starting to get away, or at least very close to it. The Hien was having trouble keeping up at low altitude. And if the Mustang kept going straight, there's a very good chance he would have gotten away from me. I managed to use my guns to kind of convince him, oh, maybe I should try to dodge this. And that was his undoing. At least I think. But yeah, you can see that the Hien was building up considerably more speed in a dive than the Zero. So I've got another thing I've been thinking about with this plane. It comes before the Ki-64 in the tech tree, which would make you think this is kind of a plane that bridges the gap between the Ki-61 at Tier 2 and the Ki-84 at Tier 4, or at Tier 3. But that's not the case either, because this plane does have a higher battle rating than the Ki-84 as well. It comes before it on the tech tree, but its battle rating is higher, which makes no fucking sense at all. This plane is inferior to the Ki-84 in every way. Maybe the MG-151 is a slightly better cannon than the HO whatever on the Ki-84, but they're both 20mm cannons, both have a pretty good rate of fire, do pretty good damage, and have good muzzle velocity. So that's not big enough of a difference to increase the battle rating by 0.3 or whatever it is, 0.4 over the Ki-84 This plane should be a good 0.5 lower and should face easier enemies than the Ki-84. The Ki-84 is just all around better. So, addressing that, back into the game here, the last guy on their team is this Corsair. The Corsair, I would say, is a fair enemy for the Hien. The Hien has a slightly better turn time, it's a better dogfighter, but the Corsair's got the advantage in straight line speed. So I see him getting away from my Zero, who has absolutely no chance in hell of catching up to him. And now I'm diving in. And you can see the Hien's good dive speed is coming into play yet again. I'm gaining on him at a pretty good rate, but it's going to start slowing down soon. So I'm going to have to use the same tactic I did with the damn P-51 and distract him with my guns and get him to turn. But this guy makes a really dumb mistake and turns anyway, for some dumbass reason, lines up the easiest shot in the world. I knock off his elevator or some shit, and there he goes into the ocean. That wasn't a challenging kill at all. And he, as well, probably had a very good chance of getting away, but he was so dumb thinking he could turn fight, and the Corsair, one of the worst turn fighters in the game, that he just made a very, very, very big mistake. And that is how I won in the Ki-61. It's basically, if the matchmaking is not good, you're going to have to count on the enemy team's dumbass mistakes to get any kills, because their planes will be far better than yours, performance-wise at least, which is all that matters to me. Against the Brits, sometimes the planes are more balanced. I'd say the Tier 3, low Tier 4 Spitfires and the Typhoon 1B is a fair enough adversary. The Typhoon's got a bit of a turn time advantage, and obviously the Spitfire does as well, but they're manageable. That's all I gotta say about that. The Russians, depending on what they're flying, sometimes you'll face Yak-9Ks and that sort of thing. Sometimes it'll be Yak-9Us. So the Russians I end up flying against the least, and I think I won every game I flew against them. So they aren't too bad. That's all I gotta say about the Russians. So, my overall opinion on this plane, if you have not gathered it already, is that it's a very strong fighter. There's nothing wrong with the flight model or any of that. It's just put way too high up on the battle rating level to be any use about half the time. Sometimes it gets into balance games, the rest of the time it doesn't. And when it doesn't, you're more or less fucked, or at the mercy of your enemy team's skill. So, one last thing is, I want to try out the Ki-61 now, since it's at a lower battle rating and has the same performance, just different armament. I'd like to see how that fares against the lower tier US fighters, just to see how effective it can be. And that's all I got to say about that. If there's any questions or comments you have, just leave them below and I'll answer them. And in the meantime, this has been Hudson with P4G. Thank you for watching, and get the fuck out of here.